Silence and a criminal underworld. This is what our guest, Trésor Ebamu Fakana, fights against daily. As a human trafficking expert, he champions medical progress in organ transplantation while exposing its dark underbelly. Vulnerable people falling prey to organ trafficking networks that serve an increasing demand from wealthy nations. In his revealing book, We Need to Talk About It, Organ Harvesting, Transplantation, Donation and Trafficking in the Democratic Republic of Congo, he exposes the mechanics of this cynical trade. He shares his insights with Alexandra Vépierre. Hello, Trésor Ebamu Fakana.
Bonjour.
Welcome to Initiative Africa. You're a political analyst based in Kinshasa and an expert in combating human trafficking. Earlier this year, you published your book, Let's Talk About It, Organ Harvesting, Transplantation, Donation and Trafficking in the Democratic Republic of Congo, published by Jet d'encre. To begin, let's focus specifically on organ transplantation. How developed is this practice in the DRC and what does the broader picture look like across Africa?
Currently in the DRC, there is a public health law that was developed around 2017, and this law allows for the harvesting of organs from deceased persons. Either based on their own consent given prior to death or the consent of their next of kin.
Tout comme sur le consentement de ses ayants droit, au fait. Alors que,
however, there's a bit of a problem here, because while the law mentions consent, in reality, there is no consent registry. So if I, for example, as a Congolese citizen, want to give my consent for organ donation after death, where would I go to register that consent? And what is the process for doctors to access and use that consent? This provision is almost entirely missing, even though the public health law exists. Now, looking at Africa more broadly, according to the website Allodoctors Africa, at least 15 African countries currently perform kidney transplants, including Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa, and Morocco. Quite a few African nations have started these procedures. However, the same issues remain: a shortage of available organs, high costs.
And
the question of whether there is sufficient infrastructure to support organ transplant operations.
So to this day, no organ transplants have been performed in the DRC?
Officially, no.
What are the main barriers to developing this medical practice?
Le frein, c'est d'abord
well, the main obstacle is ignorance. Because it seems that this field, this issue, is not very well known to the general public. Most people are unaware of the medical and technological advances in organ transplantation, and even today, it remains something of a taboo subject in Africa. Only people with a certain level of financial means, those who go to private clinics or more upscale hospitals, if I may use that term, have access to that kind of information. Beyond that, there's also the issue of having specialist doctors, professionals who truly understand this field. And I'm not sure Africa has enough of them at the moment. Even where we do have nephrologists, they're mostly focused on dialysis or diagnosing kidney failure, for instance. But when it comes to surgical transplantation, that requires a different level of specialization. So I believe the real issue here is lack of information. We need to start by bringing this topic into the public space. That's why the book is titled Let's Talk About It, because we do need to talk, to open up dialogue, to understand different points of view, the religious perspective, the scientific perspective, and the legal perspective. In short, we need input from all parts of society in order to define the legal framework, one that truly reflects our social reality.
Is there a sufficient number of organ donors across Africa?
It's difficult to know the exact statistics because in most African countries, this information is simply not available. Many of these countries only have general public health laws, which authorize transplantation in principle. But in practice, what's really needed is a national coordination system that oversees all aspects of the process, not just transplantation, but also a comprehensive organ donation policy, because organ donation must be free of charge, and donors should be fully informed of the risks and potential consequences of giving an organ. There's also the issue of what's known as transplant tourism. A kidney, for instance, could leave the DRC and be transplanted in South Africa, Cameroon, or Rwanda for another patient. So beyond just national laws, we also need to think in terms of regional and international frameworks. Take the European Union as an example. They have a European Convention that regulates organ transplantation, allowing countries like France to exchange organs with Italy or Portugal based on compatibility. This shows how important international cooperation is for Africa as well, not only to move things forward, but because organ transplantation isn't just a medical procedure, it can be a matter of life and death.
Let's now turn to the darker side of the issue, the abuses related to organ transplantation. What exactly is meant by organ trafficking?
Le trafic d'organes, c'est un ensemble d'activités.
Organ trafficking involves a range of illegal activities surrounding human organs and tissues.
Toutes les opérations liées aux organes et aux tissus humains qui ne respectent pas les cadres juridiques.
These practices violate legal and ethical frameworks,
Qui ne respectent pas certains cadres éthiques.
particularly those that govern organ donation and transplantation.
Transplantation d'organes.
In your research, did you uncover any cases of organ trafficking in the DRC or elsewhere in Africa?
Je pourrais dire que
I would describe organ trafficking as a silent crime.
asymptomatiques. Ce ne sont pas des crimes,
These are not crimes that are visible.
comme ce ne sont pas des crimes visibles. C'est pas comme
It's not like
un vol,
theft,
on peut
where you can
constater
clearly
s'il
see
y a
something
un
was
vol.
stolen.
Ce sont des
These are
crimes,
what we
comme on
might
dit,
call asymptomatic
asymptomatiques,
crimes,
qui est à la
both
fois
national and
national
transnational in
et
nature.
aussi transnational.
And I could even tell
Et
you
je
that
pourrais
organ
même vous dire
trafficking
qu'il
can
peut y
happen
avoir
without
trafic
any
d'organes
surgical
sans
incision
qu'il y ait
being made.
incision de
For example,
l'abdomen.
in the field of organ donation, it is required that donations be entirely free of
Le don
charge.
doit être gratuit. Donc, il y a l'interdiction selon la charte des Nations
According to
Unies
the United
de
Nations
marchander
Charter,
le corps
it is
humain
forbidden to
et
trade
ses
or
parties
commercialize the human
marchandiser
body
le
and
corps
its
humain.
parts.
Donc, du fait d'acheter un consentement de la personne.
So if someone
vous
pays
dites,
for
voilà,
consent, saying, here,
je te
I'll give you
propose,
50,000 euros
par
in
exemple,
exchange for your kidney or a
50 000
part of your
euros
liver.
En échange de ton rein ou d'une partie de ton foie, parce que c'est des organes.
These are organs that
qu'on
can be
peut donner en
donated
état
while
de vie,
alive,
les
and the
restants,
others
on
only
peut
after
les
death.
donner qu'après
That's
votre
already a
mort.
form of
C'est
trafficking.
déjà un trafic parce que ces dons-là devraient être
Because these donations should be voluntary, with no form of compensation.
Et puis, sans en échange
That's
de
what's
rien, en
called
fait.
an altruistic
Ça devrait
donation.
être comme ça. On appelle ça, c'est un don altruiste. Donc, du fait déjà.
So simply paying for
d'acheter ces
consent,
consentements
even before the
avant
organ
même
is
de
removed,
pratiquer
already
le prélèvement,
qualifies as
vous êtes
organ
déjà dans
trafficking.
les cas de trafic d'organes. Alors, officiellement,
Now, officially in the DRC, no cases have been reported by the government, as they base this on the legal position that there is no hospital or clinic in the country that performs organ transplants due to a lack of proper equipment or infrastructure. But when we speak of trafficking, we're referring to something illegal and illicit. It's like drug trafficking. Nowhere will you see a sign that says drugs sold here, but you can see that people are consuming them. And I can say that this issue does exist in the DRC because many Congolese citizens have already traveled abroad for organ transplants. In such cases, you have to ask, if someone had a kidney or another organ transplanted outside the DRC, how did they obtain that organ? Was there transplant tourism involved? Was someone recruited based on vulnerability, or through abuse of authority, or in exchange for financial or material gain? Because if that's the case, then it already constitutes organ trafficking. Given all of this, we've looked into the legal framework and found gaps in the law, loopholes that leave the door wide open for criminal activity. For example, if the law allows for organs to be harvested after death, but does not authorize transplantation, then what exactly are those harvested organs meant to be used for? If there is no legal framework for organ transplants in the DRC, why authorize harvesting at all? These are the kinds of questions that really give us pause and need deeper reflection.
Could the insecurity in areas like North Kivu, where the M23 rebel group is active, exacerbate the risks of organ trafficking?
Yes, absolutely. Any situation of insecurity provides fertile ground for criminal networks. Given the violence and chaos in eastern DRC, it is reasonable to suspect that organ trafficking could also be occurring there.
What are your recommendations for better regulation and safer organ donation practices?
The first priority is public awareness and education. Second, we must review and revise the legal frameworks governing this area to ensure they reflect the realities of Congolese and African society. And third, we need to strengthen international cooperation, not just to fight crime, but to share knowledge and medical expertise. Do we have enough specialists? Could they come and set up in our country? That way, people wouldn't need to travel abroad for transplants without the state being able to monitor what's happening. But if the specialists are present locally, then at least the government can oversee the process. So all of this awareness, legal reform, and especially international cooperation is absolutely key on these issues.